This podcast is brought to you by North Carolina's electric cooperatives.
This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Thank you for watching. What a week it's been. We've had Pi Day, the Ides of March, the ACC basketball tournament, and St. Patrick's Day. Well, last Friday was the filing deadline for the 3rd Congressional District special election. Today was the filing deadline Friday for the 9th District. We're going to talk about the elections along with issues being considered by this legislative session. And of course, we asked the panel to tell us something we don't know. Our panel this week includes our favorite journalist, Cash Michaels, journalist and filmmaker, John Hood, syndicated columnist and author, Chris Fitzsimon, director of the Newsroom, and Becki Gray of the John Locke Foundation. We begin our uninterrupted debate after these brief messages from our underwriters.
From treating the newest member of your family to helping a loved one make end-of-life decisions, your family physician is with you every step, for every stage of life, for every member of your family. Despite a healthcare landscape fraught with potential landmines, family physicians across North Carolina are providing you a lifetime of committed, dependable medical care. Family Physicians, your trusted healthcare advisor for life.
Life's busy, but you're in control. As an electric cooperative member, you have access to lots of tools to help manage your home energy use and budget, so you can focus on what's most important.
Closing the health insurance coverage gap could create 43,000 jobs, billions in economic activity, and save rural hospitals. Let's find a North Carolina solution for covering the uninsured. Visit careforcarolina.com.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
Let's get started. Almost 1/4 of the counties in our state are without a representative in Congress. The 3rd District is due to open because of the death of Walter Jones, while the 9th never had a winner certified in last November's elections. Filing periods for both elections are now closed. Well, they will be as of Friday afternoon. We're taping a little earlier than that. But a recent Elon University poll cast doubt on those elections. Following the fraudulent activity shown in the 9th District, only 18% of those polled are confident that future elections will be fair. 22% are not at all confident they will be. Cash Michaels, what does it say to you when only 60% of the people polled are somewhat confident in the fairness of future elections?
It tells you that North Carolinians are finally realizing something that many of us have been trying to say for the longest time, that since 2013, when the Republican-led legislature paid only strict attention to in-person voting, that absentee voting in particular has been a problem, and Republicans refuse to acknowledge it because their constituency lean that way. We have a system that is broken. It has been broken for years, and we need an up-to-down review of exactly what is done in this state. And
along those lines, Becki, we've had 5 arrests so far coming from this. Now, the feds have jumped in and said they're investigating it also. Are there going to be jail terms here?
Well, it certainly appears that way, and this is by no means over. Kim Strack said this week at some of the hearings that they are still looking into things, still gathering information. So I don't think this is anywhere near over. Where this ends, I don't know. I mean, there have been some indictments already. Some folks were out on bail, but I think it clearly is headed that way. Now, how widespread it is, I don't know. But to Cash's point, I think it's important that we get to the bottom of this to the extent that we can. We put measures in place so that it ensures the integrity of our elections.
To that end, John Kim Strack was appearing before the legislature this past week, talking about ways to potentially avoid absentee ballot fraud. One of the ways she suggested was prepaid postage, so the voters don't have to buy their own stamps. Is that a good solution? Is that a big solution?
I think that probably is part of the solution. The point is not so much that they would buy their own stamps, but that the fact that it doesn't have postage on it would lead them to perhaps hand off the ballot to somebody else who offers to buy the stamps or put the postage on it, and that is one of these issues that we're trying to avoid, is the alternative people handling so many ballots. I think that was a good idea. There were some other process questions, and there was also the argument that Kim made that we simply need to put more resources into enforcing the law, which makes sense to me.
More investigating. One of her suggestions, Chris, was that witnesses had to sign and date absentee ballots, and there had to be 2 witnesses, and that penalties for voter fraud be stiffened immeasurably. Good ideas?
All those are good ideas, and I think that she's been at this a long time. I think she has inspired confidence in both sides, I think, due to the investigation, not only her work before, but the investigation she did in this case. And I think John is on to something as well with the resources. The Board of Elections, the whole elections machinery, has been underfunded for years.
Yep.
Not just in terms of enforcing the laws at voting booths, at county levels with machines. We still have people who file campaign finance reports by hand, and people at the Board of Elections have to enter them. So sometimes the public doesn't have any idea who's giving to campaigns. I hope that this as Cash mentions, starts this whole review of our process, and one of them has to be we need more resources.
Cash, speaking of that, the big problem, perhaps, obviously there's a statewide purview and a statewide problem. The biggest problems, frankly, come down to the county boards of elections, don't they?
I agree, and some of the horror stories we heard about folks knowing about the results of early voting prior to the actual election day.
Some of the abuses.
That's ridiculous, and so we need to strengthen. Again, you took the words out of my mouth. Strengthen resources overall, but certainly straighten out the rules on the county level.
Let's get down to some of the specifics about some of these district races that are going to be held. Now, in the 3rd district, as a matter of fact, the question really came down in both the 3rd and the 9th district to who's not running. Now, in the 3rd district, it was from a standpoint of everybody and his uncle was running, and so who's not running there? On the 9th district, there were a lot of people who were projected to have gotten into the race, but for whatever reason decided they weren't going to run. In the 3rd district, we've got, it's a traditional Republican district, 17 Republicans, 6 Democrats, 2 Libertarians, the Constitutional Party, 3 legislators, 3 county commissioners. John, this is a race down here. So far as it goes, of the 17 Republicans, any front-runner names?
Well, you mentioned the current elected officials, but another person that is in the mix is Phil Law, who isn't a legislator, and he isn't a county commissioner.
Ran against Jones.
But he's on the ballot a couple of times in that district, and so he's a contender. Obviously, the legislators are contenders, particularly Speciale and Greg Murphy. You've also got some of those county commissioners. I mean, Eric Rouse, I think his name is, who is in Lenore County. He is a significant he could do some self-financing. This is a wide open race in my view.
My understanding is that Greg Murphy is getting some endorsements from other congressmen in North Carolina and some other people along those lines.
Well, I think he's one of the front runners, as we mentioned, but it's important to know why this is happening. First of all, it's relatively unusual that there's an open seat. Not, crazy unusual, but it's unusual. It's very unusual that there's an open seat when politicians who are currently in office can run and not lose their current office. I've talked about that before on the show. So sitting members of the legislature, if they lose, they're still in the legislature. Usually you'd have to give up your seat to try to win in a crowded field, which means that's part of the reason why this is attracting, I think, so many candidates.
Something else to remember in both those races is who in the primary, and particularly in the 3rd when you've got that huge crowd, the winner has to get 30% of the vote. When you've got 17 people in a primary, that's going to be pretty hard to happen, and even in the 9th.
Yeah. And the primary is scheduled for April 30th. If there's a runoff, they were trying to have the general election July 9th.
That's in the 3rd, right?
In the 3rd.
Because those schedules are not the same.
Not the same.
In the 3rd, they're almost certainly going to have a runoff primary, which will push that off.
Now, in Democrats' Cash, the big name in the Democratic Party, a couple of big names there. Ernest Reeves, who's a perennial candidate. He's run against Walter Jones before. But Alan Thomas, the former Greenville mayor, comes from a storied family. Joe Thomas and his family down in Craven County, a very storied family down there. I would suspect he might be one of the front runners in that. Any other names that you think of?
I will be honest with you. I am not as familiar with what's going on in the 3rd District as I'm sure my colleagues are, so I can't even begin. The only thing you left off your long and illustrious list before of Republicans, Democrats, and Libertarians was a partridge in a pear tree. Other than, that,
you could put 2 football teams on the field with all of these.
But someone else have to take that question.
Any other Democrat, though?
No, but I will say that Alan Thomas is a well-known person in Eastern North Carolina. You mentioned his family. This is a very Republican district. It'd have to be some unbelievably unusual event, I think, in the primary. What he might be doing, I don't know, I haven't talked to him, is positioning himself. All these district lines are going to be redrawn. If he does well, wins the nomination, runs a good campaign, they're drawing new districts in 2021.
Well, we definitely have to believe that this is a very unusual campaign year so far as it goes. Any particular issues, Becki, that you know of down there?
Well, I think health care is going to be an issue in all the races. That was the #1 issue in the exit polls that we saw from the 2018 election, and that issue has not been solved. So I think that and the economy, and then in that 3rd district particularly, I think some of the hurricane recovery concerns that are there, infrastructure, how are you going to rebuild those communities, how are you going to make them sustainable, that has to be front and center in the 3rd district.
Primary, John. You want to hazard a guess as to what kind of voter turnout we're going to have?
Tiny. And in an interesting way, what Chris's scenario is, the only way a Democrat might have a chance here, for example, is if there was a really divisive Republican primary. I'm not sure there's enough time to have a divisive Republican primary.
Well, it was in the 9th district that the GOP party chairman in one of the counties said they didn't want a divisive primary, right, which may have been one of the reasons why some of the candidates drop out. Let's move over to that primary. We've got Dan McCready, probably the front runner so far as Democrats.
No question.
As of 12 noon on Friday, I didn't see any other names that had filed for that.
No, he's the candidate.
He's the candidate. All right, so among Republicans, lots of people decided not to run, people whose names were known. Tommy Tucker, former Governor Pat McCrory, Dan Barry, Kenny Smith, Dean Arp, David Blackwelder, Nat Robinson, all people who have held elected positions who are known, decided not to. Why?
Probably as many answers as the names that you gave, but one of the things is there's a real difference between what you're stepping into in the 3rd Congressional District and what you're stepping into in the 9th. The 3rd Walter Jones died, and so people are just stepping into that. In the 9th District, I mean, look at the controversy that we've dealt with since the November election and all of those things.
But this is a Republican district.
No,
not necessarily.
Okay. I think that's part of the reason not as many Republicans are running. The Republican nominee is not certain, but generally is pretty sure going to win the 3rd district. The 9th district is up for grabs. You're running against a well-funded candidate who did fairly well in that district, and I think that's one of the reasons why people, if you don't really think you have a really good chance to win the general election, I think it's keeping some people away.
McCready has demonstrated he can raise money. All right, John, I'm going to ask you to dust off your crystal ball again. Of the names who have been, and by the way, one of the late names that was added to this was Fern Schubert, who many of us know and remember from her days in the legislature in North Carolina, from Union County. So far as it goes, run through the names you think might be the most prominent.
It's a complex situation, but remember that Mecklenburg and Union are by far, they are the dominant force in this district. It goes all the way out towards Fayetteville, but
But it's not all of Mecklenburg County.
Correct, but the bulk of I think something a little over a third in Mecklenburg, a little over a third in Union. Those are the dominant parts of the, particularly on the Republican primary side. And Stony Rushing is a county commissioner in Union. He's the one that Mark Harris endorsed rather quickly, but Fern Schubert got in. That'll split that Union County vote. And in the Mecklenburg County area, Dan Bishop is probably the most well-known. He's a state senator, probably the best funded, but Matt Ridenhour, who was a county commissioner, Anna Marine, as McCready is another candidate, and is Lee Brown, who is a not as well-known but potentially well-funded female candidate for Mecklenburg.
Gash, he talked about the candidate that Mark Harris was endorsing, Boss Hogg. The guy's name is Stony Rushing.
I've seen his picture.
He dresses up.
Yeah, I've seen his
just
picture.
like Boss Hogg. So are we getting show business back into politics
and
again?
He had a big rifle with him, too, if I'm not mistaken.
He owns a gun shop.
I suspect that the reason why you don't have as many big-name Republicans signing up to run in the 9th District is because they can't hire McCrae Dowless anymore.
Ooh, low blow. All right, so the primary there is May 14th. General election scheduled for September 10th. If there's going to be a runoff, then it's going to be the runoff on September 10th and the general on November 5th. How likely are we to have a runoff in this one?
I believe a runoff is likely here as well, in part because what you may end up with is a one candidate that sort of has the bulk of the vote in Mecklenburg and one in the bulk of the vote in Union, and then you'd have a runoff.
With all of the discussion that has been going on about this 9th district, is the turnout going to be any bigger here than perhaps it was going to be in the 3rd?
I don't think so, especially certainly not in the primary. I mean, even though I think that all the candidates will get people to the polls, I don't think, unless something happens that we don't know, I'm not sure that people are paying. I mean, they know about the scandal. I'm not sure they know about the election.
McCready's got to have a campaign platform built around an integrity in elections.
Of course.
Any other issues?
Well, that, and, you know, don't forget, I mean, he has a donor base. He has already, a lot of people in that district have already voted for him. It's kind of a reset for him. For everybody else, it's a brand new election. And when you have that real compact time for a primary, there's not a lot of time to get your name out. So I think incumbents, people who have run for office, that people have voted for them in the past, have a clear advantage in this.
One pundit from up in the Mecklenburg County said that the person that goes on TV first is probably going to be
and
the
that
winner.
takes money. So, you know, that's the other key to it. You know,
again,
who's got money either
into,
in their coffers
falls
or...
into Dan McCready's hands, doesn't it?
No.
I
think in the Republican primary.
In the Republican primary. Okay.
And again, there are going to be some well-funded candidates. I've mentioned them, all from Mecklenburg, I think.
So the cries for Republican unity and no divisiveness, no family feuds.
I'm not sure this will be a particularly divisive primary either. There just isn't a whole lot of time. It's mostly a name recognition, turn your vote out primary.
All right, let's switch subjects. Now that Governor Cooper has submitted his budget proposals, the legislature is really getting down to the business of this session. There are already many bills in the hopper, and we want our panel to discuss some of them with you. Becki, I know you spend a lot of time over at the legislature. What's the tone over there on Jones Street this year? How's the loss of the supermajorities affecting the legislation, if at all?
Well, first of all, I mean, things are really gearing up. You're seeing that just in the last week or so. We've had about 650 bills have been filed. Generally, what's filed in a session is close to 2,000, so that kind of gives you an idea. The governor has signed 3 bills, so we're very early in this process. Right now, a lot of the things that you're seeing, whether it's a hands-free, you know, ban cell phone kind of bill, whether it's some of the alcohol, loosening up some of the ABC regulations, some of those kind of things, there's bipartisan support for this. Where we're really going to see the real controversy is with the budget, and that's where vetoes and whether or not there are going to be enough votes for the Republicans to do what they want to do, we're really going to see it in the budget, and that's months away.
Cash, one of the things that happened this past week is Speaker Tim Moore sponsored legislation to require all of the sheriffs, the 100 sheriffs in North Carolina, to work with ICE in enforcement of the 287G immigration issue. Several of the sheriffs, particularly in the larger counties, Wake, Mecklenburg, some of the larger counties in North Carolina, have discontinued that. Right. What do you think? Got the votes?
First of all, many of those sheriffs, when asked to comment, have said, I don't have anything to say, which tells me that they're talking to their county, their department or agency attorneys about how to deal with this. It's going to be a fight because that's how these sheriffs won election to begin with. They promised they would simply stop working with ICE. Apparently the electorate agrees that they should. And particularly here in Wake, well, this is not Wake County, this is in Durham. But either way, in Wake County, for instance, he told, Sheriff Baker told the folks there to go on with your lives. They don't like that.
Might the number of raids that ICE has been conducting since some of these counties discontinued the 287G program, might they halt if this bill was passed, Chris?
I don't think so. I mean, I think this is part of the national agenda that we're hearing about. The country is now kind of ripped asunder by the immigration rhetoric that largely is coming out of the White House, and whether this is similar to what President Trump is saying or not, the perception is this is a very divisive issue that needs a comprehensive solution. I think this is a little bit of grandstanding by the Speaker. This would be interesting. One place where if Governor Cooper stands with these elected sheriffs who are upset about it, this might be one of the times when we see the supermajority, the loss of the supermajority play a role in what happens.
Let's hit a few more of these bills. John, one of them is the legislature going back on what they had done just a few years ago and restoring the number of Court of Appeals judges from 12 to 15. Is that going to pass?
That's done.
It's done?
Yeah.
Didn't realize it had passed.
He signed it.
Yeah.
All right. So I have a question and a procedural question. When Governor Cooper appointed a Court of Appeals judge, theoretically, it would have shrunk the numbers down to the point where prior to the passage of this bill, we wouldn't have to have another election. We're going to have a special election for the Court of Appeals?
I think the governor will appoint someone to the Court of Appeals just as he appointed someone to the Supreme Court.
He would not have done it under the previous law.
That's correct.
Right. It would have just shrunk the court. All right, let's talk about some more. Chris, there's been a huge battle going on the last few years between the craft brewers and the beer distributors in North Carolina over whether they have to go through distributors, how many barrels they can produce without going through. Anyway, late this week we understood that a compromise had been reached in which the previous limit of 25,000 barrels before you had to be distributed by a recognized distributor is going to be raised to 50,000. Is this going to solve the problem?
Well, I know this is an issue near and dear to Becky's heart, but I'll comment on it anyway. I don't know if it'll solve the problem. I think it takes some of the pressure off for a while.
How so, Becki? Never mind. Go ahead.
I think from a policy perspective, I was speaking, not from a beer perspective, although I don't know.
Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome. No, I think this will take the pressure off for a while of this issue, and it looked like that I guess the wholesalers saw that something worse was coming, which is why you come to a table and compromise. I think this will quiet things down for a while.
Cash. One bill would pay teachers extra for carrying guns in our classroom.
The Lord have mercy.
Is it going to pass?
Well, you have Republican majority. The answer is yes. Question is, will the governor sign it? And the answer to that is no. I caught myself, no.
Yeah, well, I was getting ready I was preparing for a lengthy answer here. Becki, another one is these association health plans.
Right.
This has been debated. It was attempted last year, didn't pass. Looks like it's on a more favorable footing.
Absolutely, and it was kind of introduced last year at the short session. This is something that has come about with the Trump administration looking at opening up some of the health care markets and health insurance to offer more competition. So he has allowed, the Trump administration has allowed states to look at this, and North Carolina is looking at it, as are many states. But this would allow associations like the Farm Bureau, like the North Carolina Association of Realtors, like the North Carolina Retail Merchants Association, some of those associations to offer health plans that for their members that better suits their needs at more affordable cost.
Redistricting, is it going to pass, John?
I think there's a pretty good chance that redistricting reform in some form will pass the House. It's still uncertain right now in the Senate, but I'm hopeful.
John, Chris, so far as it goes, the bond package, the Senate has one plan, the House has another one, the governor has another one. One of the arguments that was raised was the fact that the governor said in his State of the State speech that over 40% of the school buildings in North Carolina are over 50 years old. They did a fact check on this, by the way, and they proved that's right. Does that make the case for a school bond?
Well, I think the case is already made, and I thought that, I think that some school construction bill will pass this year. The question is, will the Senate plan to pay as you go pass? I think the time is right to build more of these things quickly. This will be one of the bigger issues, I think, that will be battled out along with the budget as the session continues.
Interesting. How about so far as the business of broadcasting the sessions on some sort of cable or network or something like that so that the people could actually see what's going on? The House seems to be moving faster on that than the Senate.
This is not a new idea. This has been around for a number of years. The question comes down to who's going to pay for that. There are costs associated with bringing in the cameras, the personnel, those kind of things. That's where the bump is.
One final question I need to raise on this. There have been lots of, this is Sunshine Week. I forgot to mention that in the intro. Sunshine Week.
Every week is Sunshine Week on NC Spin.
Well, that's true. Sometimes. Sometimes it's brighter than others, there's no question. But so far as it goes, one of the freshman legislators introduced a bill which would say you had to have 24-hour notice before any action was taken on bills, that the legislature could only meet between 7 a.m. and 9 p.m., committee meetings could only be at a certain time, and the gut and amend provisions that have been so popular. This thing was sent to 12 different committees, John. What does that say to you?
There was just such a great deal of interest in it. They wanted to make sure all the different committees could absolutely could really talk about it.
Can you say dead boys and girls?
It has some promising elements and elements that wouldn't really be practical. We'll see what happens.
Well, quickly, we got time for Tell Us Something We Don't Know. Cash Michaels.
Mark Davis, the now newly appointed justice to the North Carolina Supreme Court. He was special counsel to Governor Perdue, as we well know. As special counsel, he is the one who investigated the Wilmington 10 case. It is on his recommendation that she offered the
John Hood, tell us something we don't know.
In the last 12 months, North Carolina's employers added about 74,000 new jobs, 1.7% growth rate.
Chris, tell us something.
I was going to say something about Mark Davis, first Jewish Supreme Court justice in North Carolina's history.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yes, sir.
How about that? Okay, Becki Gray, tell us something we don't know.
Two pieces of legislation making their way through the General Assembly have to do with property rights. One would repeal MAP Act. The other would put an eminent domain protection clause in our Constitution.
And I've got one. This is, for me, the end of a 62-year love affair. Over-the-air broadcast television of ACC basketball and football games ends with the end of the ACC basketball tournament. My dad helped build the first network in 1957 for the UNC Tar Heels. Gosh, I just hate to see this go away. Well, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, sign up for our free weekly email newsletter. By the way, you can read about that on my weekly column this week on our website. Visit ncspin.com or catch us on Facebook and join us next week for more balanced debate for the Old North State. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
From treating the newest member of your family to helping a loved one make end-of-life decisions, your family physician is with you every step, for every stage of life, for every member of your family. Despite a healthcare landscape fraught with potential landmines, family physicians across North Carolina are providing you a lifetime of committed, dependable medical care. Family Physicians, your trusted healthcare advisor for life.
Life's busy, but you're in control. As an electric cooperative member, you have access to lots of tools to help manage your home energy use and budget, so you can focus on what's most important.
Closing the health insurance coverage gap could create 43,000 jobs, billions in economic activity, and save rural hospitals. Let's find a North Carolina solution for covering the uninsured. Visit careforcarolina.com.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
North Carolina Channel is made possible by the financial contributions of viewers like you who support the UNC TV network.